So hello, this is Olive Hickmott, and it's great to be back on Active in Redbourne's Live Well with Air again. And I'm delighted to have Dr. Mike Cannell back with me again today by popular demand. And this week he's going to mainly focus on the herbal support. This is now, just to tell you about Live Well with Air, this is now the 10th week of events. And it's quite interesting how they've proved very complementary and overlapping to each other. And so we have nutritionists talking about herbs as well and all sorts of things. So just follow along with all of them. And if you are a YouTube user, then you'll find that they're all up there on YouTube, organized in terms of which week they were played and which who was the presenter for them. So do go and have a look. So with no more ado, let's start with a few questions for Mike. And last time he talked about the immune system, and he's going to sort of start there. And my first question for him, which was hung over from last time, was why is keeping sugar and carbs low in your diet so important to your immune system?
Well, first of all, sugar, and we call them white foods, but those which are rich in carbohydrate, like a lot of pasta and rice and potato, I'm not saying none at all, but just in excess, they are full of starch, which is broken down to sugar or glucose. And these, not only do they give rise to a much greater risk of diabetes and cholesterol problems and heart disease and vascular vessel disease, etc., but also they do affect the immune system in a very strong way. And the liver is unable to detoxify, get rid of very quickly high sugar loads. So it has widespread effects, and particularly going back to the immune system, for reasons which are more complicated to explain, it tends to be more inflammatory to the body, and inflammation in general is something you want to avoid, because that again leads to complications.
Great, thank you. And we've had so many people talking about the immune system in different aspects. It's actually great to have another contribution. So moving on to plant-based foods, why are they so special? And there's lots of really strange names like polyphytonutrients, and I can't pronounce these, but do talk to us about these. What are they?
Well, herbs in general have been used for thousands of years by us humans to fend off disease and infections. You have to realize that plants themselves have a natural defense system, so they are not attacked by viruses and fungi and bacteria, or to minimize the attacks. So when you ingest them, you're ingesting everything that nature has learnt over the millennia to fight off things. And many of these plants, and particularly herbs and spices, had a huge, horrendous, large number of benefits for us. So just to cut through the jargon, phytonutrients means nutrients derived from plants. Polyphenols is slightly more complicated, and I will send you a picture on the Facebook page, giving you more information. But basically you have a group of red plants and fruit and vegetables. You have purple ones, you have green ones, you have yellow ones, and you have white ones. And they all from different plants, edible and spices and herbs. And these are full of polyphenols. It's the shape of the structure. So one simple example, we all know chocolate, and I've got a few I don't think you'll be able to see them very well. This is cocoa husks from a well-known high street shop in St Albans, and this is made, of course, from the husk of the cocoa bean. This is full of polyphenols, and this is extremely healthy for blood vessel disease, circulation, blood pressure, and I add these to my granola every day. Other phytonutrients, you might include linseed. This is ground linseed on this plate. also from a well-known high street shop, and easily obtainable. And linseed, again, is very good to lower cholesterol, help your microbiome, help the immune system in many diverse ways. So these are just examples of phytonutrients. The longer word, which I sometimes stumble over, carotenoids, this is simply an example is carrots. That's where the name comes from, because carrots, we all know the truth, there is a truth that vitamin A comes from carrots particularly, and many other foods. Vitamin A is a carotenoid, and all those fruits and vegetables that are coloured tend to be coloured because of these carotenoids. That's like the pigment, and that's why for our health of our eyes we need the things that tend to be of yellow pigment. We call them lutein as an example, and zeaxanthin another one, but basically they're pigments, and the eye needs them for the health of the eye to prevent macular degeneration, which is something that you get if you're unlucky when you age. So the more we consume and know about plants and phytonutrients, the better. I think we better move on to the next question before I carry on.
I tell you what, I've been growing carrots this year for the first time ever, and I love it. They taste, when you pull them out of the ground and you give them a quick wash, they taste so like carrots, much better than the ones you can buy. Anyway, and they're little ones. Okay, are there drugs derived from plants that have or are being used? What are they?
There's a whole range of them. I mean, the one which I find fascinating, up to the 1960s, cardiologists used to prescribe, we call it hawthorn, but the Latin name is crataegus, but you have hawthorn berries and so on, but they would prescribe it as a tincture in the 1950s anyway, and it was in the British Pharmacopoeia because it was so known to be widely beneficial to health and the cardiovascular and heart system, and therefore it's almost free of side effects unless you have a huge amount. I mean, that's the same with anything. If you have a huge amount of anything, if you have a huge amount of carrots, there have been a couple of people who've died because they had a diet full of carrots and they turned yellow or orange. Moving on.
So where are we on research?
Other examples, coca leaves, of course. You get cocaine, which is used by anaesthetists apart from drug addicts. Aspirin came from willow bark. Quinine, often used for leg cramps, came from China. Aficionalis, it's the bark of the tree from Peru. Digitalis, you know the plant digitalis, the foxglove. Digoxin came from that. We have coffee, gave us caffeine, which is used for neonatal babies who have trouble breathing. As a modern cancer drug made from the yew tree. I could go on, but there's a lot. And there is a lot of research. For instance, you mentioned research. There's an awful lot of research going on to do with the benefits of turmeric. The Latin name is curcumin. There's an awful lot of research going on in resveratrol. I have trouble pronouncing that. If you have your glass of red wine or your grapes, red grapes, they're full of resveratrol, as is Chinese knotweed, by the way. That's the highest. Ginger is also, there's a lot of research about ginger and the benefits of ginger.
Right. Are they, is there any particular way of taking some of these, or does it really not matter?
I mean, I'm not a trained herbalist, and I can tell you, perhaps on the posting on the web page, the site where you can look up a medical herbalist, how to get in contact with one. But usually you make a tincture, either with water, boiling hot water is a common one. We call that an infusion. But there's many ways, or you can make a sort of syrup using often some alcohol like you would if you were making your own gin. The same sort of principle, which I'm not encouraging at all.
So tell me a bit more about nasal breathing, because I'm talking about this all the time.
Well, you got me on the subject, really, Olive, but nasal breathing, there's a very rich blood vessels inside the nose, and for some reason, this is how we've developed, when we breathe in, we produce nitric oxide, which is a natural substance in our body, which vasodilates. That means enlarges the blood vessels, which could help with blood pressure. It can help with oxygenation because the blood vessels in the lungs improve. It can help with your vessels in your legs. And nasal breathing does that. So it improves the oxygenation of our tissues. And of course, with COVID-19, improving the health of your lungs is paramount. And as Olive has explained, you breathing with the diaphragm down and through the nose, practicing keeping your mouth closed. Olive will tell you more about that. And we'll see later, if we want to, I can post it on the web page, what this nitric oxide does in the bodies. I can explain the science if people are interested.
That would be great, thank you. I'm still learning. It was fascinating. I started this journey a year ago. Is there anything else you can do to boost these pathways apart from just breathing through your nose?
Well, we talked about cocoa husks, which I showed you.
Yeah,
and we talked about berries, blueberries, blackberries, all these, and they are being researched. You have to take quite a high dose of blueberries, you know, not just a handful, but probably more like a cereal bowl full, which can be quite expensive, but you can buy, of course, people sell extracts or concentrates of berries.
Right, okay. What about regulation? This is always a thorny subject, but we have to have regulation of herbal practitioners, I'm sure.
Yes, and again, I can post it on the Facebook, but there is a regulatory framework, and I didn't know this until recently, that there is a regulatory herbal product. So products have to be regulated and passed as safe and standardized, and there is actually a list that can be prescribed on the NHS, but I don't think many doctors would know about it or would even agree to prescribing it, but there is. Like there are few NHS clinics in herbal medicine. This is almost a secret. There is one in Whipps Cross Hospital, for instance. In the dermatology department, there's a herbal practitioner, and there's several other herbal practitioners in the NHS, but they're almost a secret.
Is it possible to get referred to them?
Well, in theory, yes, but as we know, like similar to homeopathy, there's it depends whether your local area has a contract with that particular hospital or that particular department. It's all very contractually driven. So if you're living in Camden or somewhere near Whipps Cross, you might very well find it easier to be referred.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's just mention safety, because as I said, thousands of years these have been used, but there are a few which you have to realize that they can interact with some modern drugs.
Yeah.
So for instance, St. John's wort is widely used for depression, and trials have shown that St. John's wort is good as a prescribable modern antidepressant if taken over several months. It's not fast acting, but the trouble is it does interfere if people are on the contraceptive pill, certain drugs for epilepsy. So some of these you do have to check with your doctor. Most are very safe, but you have to realize there is this problem. And the other warning is that Chinese herbalists perhaps have different training, and they often use a combination of herbs. And there was one trial at Great Ormond Street in dermatology using Chinese herbs for eczema, and they had to stop it because of some liver complications. So this is again why you need to see a medical herbalist, and unless you happen to have a GP who's knowledgeable on herbs, and some GPs are, if you're lucky.
And what's the connection between herbal medicine and homeopathy, which I understand you practice as well?
Well, we might cover this at a later date, but
yeah,
the truth of the matter is herbal medicine uses measurable milligrams of the herb, or sometimes mixtures. Homeopathy uses very, very, very minutely diluted, microdilution, I'd say, or nano dilution. And for reasons I can't explain on this web recording, are still effective at these very low dilutions, because from 20 years experience, I know that's true. But that's the big difference. So you don't have safety concerns really with homeopathy, because we don't have to worry about toxicity.
And people will have met homeopathy in simple things like arnica, I'm sure. It's really common for bruising.
Yes. It's a very interesting overlap, because at the low dilutions homeopathy, which sometimes one might use a tincture, for instance, crataegus, some homeopaths would use the hawthorn tincture as a treatment, or you might use it as a 1,000th dilution. And that's the same as some herbal practitioners also use their products in a more dilute form. So there isn't like an overlap between the two, but there is a fundamental difference as well.
Okay, and are you going to mention some herbs that you found useful in your practice?
Yes, I was just looking at the list. There's a huge list here, but if we just concentrate first of all on the upper respiratory tract and viruses, because that's what we're dealing with in the next winter. We probably all know that garlic is very good for the immune system. So is basil, but so is things like echinacea. Echinacea is very, very safe. You can readily buy it, and follow the instructions, and it will do you no harm, and it'll be very helpful. Black elderberry is an old one, which probably our grandparents used to make themselves as a syrup. You can also drink it as a tea. That's very, very effective. There's a very interesting one which I'm learning more and more about, frankincense. Frankincense, we know from the Bible story, but when it was given by the 3 wise men, but it was given because it was considered so valuable as an herb or as an oil, more valuable than gold. And frankincense comes from a tree, Boswellia tree, found in Africa and Arabia and Middle East. And as an essential oil, if you breathe it in, it helps the lungs, it helps the immune system, it helps asthma. You can even apply it to your feet, and the essential oil will be absorbed into your body. And I think you can even burn it, so you get the vapor. It's something which I'm looking into more, but there's a lot of research into Boswellia for asthma, arthritis, and other immune conditions. That's another big research. The other herb, again, I'm learning about astragalus. It's a Chinese herb. It's sold in quite a few high street shops as a tincture. Very good for the immune system. There's a few other ones, feverfew, which I haven't got a lot of experience with, but it's said to be good for viruses and upper respiratory infections and headaches, and I think arthritis. And then, of course, there's ginger. We've already mentioned curcumin. The other ones I use a lot of, if we talk about keeping your brain healthy, curcumin I often recommend. Ginkgo biloba, you must get a standardized extract with all these. and the ashwagandha, which is Indian ginseng. I use that a lot. Perhaps brain health is another topic we could talk about in the future.
Sure.
Sleep. Now, you mentioned something recently to me, Olive, didn't you, about a herbal one?
Yes, I mean, first of all, the work I did on breathing also was relevant to sleep, and I have done a sleep session on this about talking about not only nose breathing but also the sleep cycles and what people do during the night and how they can wake up in the top of a sleep cycle. So if you've got anybody that struggles to stay asleep, then do look at the work on sleep cycles. When my son was very, very little, that saved my life because he used to wake up every 40 minutes and I never understood why until I read about sleep cycles. So do have a look at that. And as from the point of view of herbs, I discovered when my husband wasn't well, the dormicin, which is a Vogel product, and I think that's got a couple of herbs in it. But I found it absolutely amazing at helping people get to sleep.
Yes, no, I looked it up because I had to remind myself what it contained. And it contains valerian, which is a very, very safe and good herb for sleep, helping you to sleep. And it contains hops. So those are the two. And as you found, they're beneficial.
I would have a personal recommendation on it is get to bed before you drink it, because the advice is that you drink it in advance of going to bed. But I found that you could actually, if you were awake for more than like 15 minutes, you lost the benefit of it. So go to bed first.
That's interesting. And the other ones that can help you to sleep, passiflora, sometimes that is sold. Melissa, which is lemon balm, some mixtures contain that. And I've also read about rhodiola, that's with an R-H-O-D-I-O-L-A. So there's at least 4, but I would start with the one that Olive mentioned. Vogel is a very good make. It's a Swiss or German make, and they're very good with herbs. You can't go wrong with Vogel.
And they do an echinacea one as well.
Yes.
Which is easy to get hold of.
I think I've probably got a few more. Have I got 5 more minutes, do you think?
Yes, sure. And have you got, we didn't talk about ones you use in cooking or culinary use?
Well, I mean, like I've said, any of the herbs, oregano is very good for your digestive system. Basil is good for your immune system. You can make teas, which include basil, garlic and turmeric I've mentioned. Cinnamon, I haven't mentioned cinnamon. And I've started recommending this to especially diabetics, but cinnamon lowers blood sugar. So
oh, really?
A good recipe is stewed apples, either with the skin or without the skin. That's very good for your microbiome, your healthy bacteria. You want to boost those. So stewed apples is very good. And you can add some cinnamon to it, which helps to lower the blood sugar. And if you want to add a few currants, you can, a few currants. But stewed apples and cinnamon is very good. For men who've got prostate problems, you can get a herb, saw palmetto. This came from the North American Indians who discovered it was good for their urinary system. There's several brand names. I use it both as a herbal one and in homeopathic mixture, tinctures. Saw palmetto. Pomegranate is very good. Pomegranate seeds for prostate. And the good old tomatoes, because they contain lycopene, which is very, very active, helping the prostate and also circulation. And the good old Italians, they knew the trick because they added olive oil, all these things. Olive oil is needed for the goodness of the tomato, and the same for peppers and other things. To come out, to be absorbed, you need some oil. So the Italians know what they're doing.
I heard a rumor the other day, can I ask you that, about tomatoes and I think peppers as well not being good for arthritis?
There is a rumor in the sense that for a long time, there may be a subgroup who are sensitive to what we call the Solanaceae plant group. I wouldn't say it's generally for the population, but the Solanaceae plant group, it contains things like potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, and it's one of these things, if I saw somebody with arthritis, you might be mentioning it at the bottom of the list. You know, I would first of all ask them other things, because it's quite a difficult diet to go on. But to some people, it does help some people, yes.
Okay. Right, is there anything else you would like to mention for the listeners?
I could go on with other herbs, but I think there's enough to digest. There's mushrooms. I haven't mentioned Chinese mushrooms. You know, we can learn an awful lot from Chinese medicine and Indian, what we call it, Ayurvedic medicine. And the pity about the Chinese medicine, they've got at least 2,000 or 3,000, or if more, medicinal products, some of which, of course, we wouldn't want to even use, things like rhinoceros and elephant trunks. We won't go into that. But in terms of plants and herbs, and a lot of this that we in the West don't know about because it's in the Chinese medical literature, and very few has been translated or come across to the West. But there's quite a few Chinese mushrooms like lion's mane, which is very good for brain health, and other mushrooms. Cordyceps I've mentioned. No, I'm not sure I have. That's another mushroom, helps the immune system. So there we are. So I have more mushrooms. They also have some vitamin D in mushrooms if you let the sun get to them. You have some vitamin D from them.
Do you know, we learnt that from the class last week on nutrition class, and the girl who was doing that said, let sunshine onto your mushrooms. I've never heard that before.
Yes.
But it's great. I mean, vitamin D is so important, as you talked about last time. And so we eat loads of mushrooms, but I've never encouraged them. It's really weird though, isn't it? Because don't mushrooms grow in dark places?
Yes, yes. Yes, it's a paradox.
Exactly. So thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to say before you finish?
No, I'll put some postings on the Facebook with a few interesting pictures and informations, which I think people might find helpful.
Okay, that's great.
I'm still a novice in this, but we're all learning all the time.
Great. And thank you very much for coming along.
Okay,
and delightful to have you here.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.